We are fighting a fight right now. We are following the Marquis, the Queensberry rules. We're wearing gloves, and we're not hitting behind the head. Our allies are bare knuckle, and our foes are wearing brass knuckles. Okay, so the bottom line is, if tariffs are so awful, why do these other nations we trade with have them against our products? Because it has resulted in us losing industry. And again, it gets back to tariffs being a tax on imported goods. We wouldn't have to import those goods if we didn't lose 7 million manufacturing jobs. All right, so maybe it's a little early to take a victory lap, and I'm superstitious anyway, but the point I was trying to make is that you got to kind of fight fire with fire, but not everyone agrees. So we brought in David McIntosh, Club for Growth president, former Indiana congressman. Mattie Duppler is with us as well, Independent Women's Forum's visiting fellow and National Taxpayers Union senior fellow. Adriana Cohen, syndicated columnist and Boston Herald radio host. All right, Mattie, I got to go with you. First of all, you got to admit you were a little bit excited when you heard that EU news, right?
Charles, I don't know if you saw my tweet earlier. I said this might be the first time I'm on the show where we can agree on some of the administration's trade policies after this meeting today. Listen, when it comes to trade and what the best solution is, I think the president laid it out pretty clearly today. Zero tariffs, zero non-tariff barriers, zero subsidies. That's exactly what I want to see when I see our president negotiate with other countries and try to establish fair and free trade.
But the optimum word here that I want to ask you about is negotiate. How else could we or President Trump have gotten these folks to the negotiating table? That's what I'm saying. Okay, no one disagrees with that, but is there a different tactic that President Trump can use, for instance, now that we move on to China, other than hardball tactics?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, look at the EU. The EU has given us plenty of opportunities to hit back when they take aim at American companies. Recently at the G20 summit this last weekend, EU officials were trying once again to pressure Treasury Secretary Mnuchin to agree to their new plan to tax tech companies here in the United States. For years, the EU has threatened American companies, saying that because they work in tech and they have digital services, they should be levied a new tax in the EU. The United States administration, under the Obama administration, was pretty clear that they thought that this was a bad tact. The Trump administration should be hitting back on these points as well. It's very obvious when the EU has gone after what are objectively American companies, and the Trump administration so far hasn't given as clear of an answer for why that's not going to be tolerated.
Well, that Google fine was egregious, to be sure.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
David, you know, listen, Club for Growth, I know you're old school, capitalists, and you believe in free trade,
markets, pro-growth,
but if President Trump can pull off a deal now, it feels like we're close to Mexico. With these hardball tactics, this approach that he's taking, some call it ham-fisted, whatever. I think it's the only way we could get these folks to the bargaining table, and I think it's the only way we're going to get a deal with China.
I think it depends on which country, which folks. One, I'm delighted with the zero tariffs, zero regulatory barriers, zero subsidies. Great goal, great announcement today. Now, as they follow through, that'll be key. I think with Europe, they want to be allies with the U.S. A more traditional approach would have gotten them to the table as well. Mexico and Canada depend on the U.S. We don't have to turn them into enemies. China is an adversary of ours. So there, I'd use a slightly different approach. They want to be accepted in the world. So instead of one-on-one beating up China, I would have corralled all of our other allies who also suffer under China's policy, and then really force them.
You think they have the backbone for it? I mean, we're talking about some of the same allies that don't want to go against Iran on their nuclear deal, right? They don't want us to scuttle that. There's also the issue that these same allies don't want to even pay their fair share of NATO. So, I mean, is it smart to surround yourself if they don't have the same backbone that we have?
Look, I think the key is France and Germany to Europe and lining them up. And Trump has a good friendship and alliance with the French president. Germany, he doesn't, but I think there the common sense, what's going to be good for our economy, will prevail.
Right.
So I think it can be done.
Okay. Adriana, your thoughts?
This was a huge win for free and fair trade, thanks to the Trump administration. I mean, we haven't seen progress like this in leveling these massive trade inequities.
Was there any other way we could have brought these folks to the table this quickly?
I don't believe so. I think you do have to play hardball. I mean, look, if we were going to take the approach of Paul Ryan, you know, just basically standing back and hoping that it just works out on its own, I mean, why hasn't he solved the problem? If he's so against, establishment politicians are so against the threat of tariffs, they're so afraid of a potential trade war that they haven't been able to act on it and correct these massive inequities. And look, where are we? You know, we needed a change agent, someone who wasn't afraid to punch back and take a different tact. And we're already seeing massive success in this arena. So I also like the fact that we're going to, you know, improve the terms of the World Trade Organization, because China just has too great of an advantage, and that needs to be renegotiated.
Well, it does. And listen, Mattie, I can see you want to jump back in. Unfortunately, we're out of time. Thank you all.
Always out of time, Charles. Thank you.
Thank you very much, all of you. Appreciate it. Coming up, another President Trump-backed candidate notches a huge win. I'm talking about this Georgia GOP primary